let's start, and people can join us as over the next few minutes. So, welcome everybody. Everybody on the call knows me, apart from our speaker, who we'll introduce in a second. So, John, my name's Naveed Chowdhury. We've emailed. I'm the head of campaigns at Results UK. A big welcome to you. And on these regular calls, they're every month, and we share what we've been achieving together in our community across the UK to advance our advocacy on international development issues. This month, we're going to run things in a very slightly different order than we usually do, because John, our speaker, is kindly joined us from Harare in Zimbabwe, and he's an hour ahead of us. And so, because of the late hour for him, we're going to invite him to speak first, so that he can take questions and then leave us after about half an hour, and then we can go through the rest of our usual agenda after that. And finished around 9 p.m. UK time, with some informal discussion time after that for anyone who wants to stay longer in the usual way. Hope this is going to work okay for everybody. So first, I'll start off with the usual housekeeping messages that you're all used to. Please keep yourself muted during the call. If you have any questions or comments, please use the chat box. Captions are turned on, so you can enable those or disable those as you want. And as usual, we're recording the call for people who weren't able to make it. So if you prefer not to be in the call, just turn your video off. That's fine. If anyone would like to just say hello, please do. Hello, Pete. Okay. Well, I'm going to start, as I said, by introducing our guest speaker. A little bit abruptly, as I say, we want to give him as much time as possible. So our guest is John Makato, who is the Executive Director of the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, which is a people-based movement working to deliver sustainable socio-economic justice in Zimbabwe. So, John, a very big welcome to you, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. I think we're looking forward to having you provide insight into some of the impact that some of the problems of the global financial citizens can have on the people of Zimbabwe, who face the consequences of political choices that have been made, particularly around unsustainable debt that Zimbabwe is burdened with. So let me introduce you, John, to the people who are on this call this evening. You're here with Results volunteers from around the UK, who are all active in taking action in solidarity with people around the world, aiming to secure a more equal world for all, free of poverty. We're all really excited to hear what you have to say to us, and then I'm sure there'll be many questions for you about the economic and political situation in Zimbabwe. But before we go into your remarks, would you be able to spend a minute or two just introducing yourself, how you got involved in the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, and what motivates you as a campaigner for social justice?
Thank you so much, Naveed, and really it's an honor for me to be joining this meeting and meeting everyone here today. My camera unfortunately is failing me, so I'll just try to connect my video with my other gadget briefly, and then I'll turn it off just to greet everyone. Hello, Sunit. I think it's one of the people that I've met before. Sure. So
Hi, John.
as introduced, let me just my name is John Makato. I'm the executive director for Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, ZimCOD. I joined the movement, ZimCOD, in 2018, driven by passion for fighting inequalities in Zimbabwe, driven by passion for economic justice. And I was coming from an anti-corruption movement, anti-corruption advocacy organization, having worked for Transparency International Zimbabwe for over 7 years, having worked for CARE International, Fight Inequality Alliance, and I landed, with the Policy and Advocacy Unit of ZimCOD, the Zimbabwe Coalition on Data and Development. And yes, from last year on, since I assumed the role of the team lead at ZimCOD as the executive director, and yeah, our struggles for debt justice have remained very relevant as much as they were 25 years ago, at the time of the formation of the coalition in the year 2000, established around the debt justice movement, Jubilee 2000 movement. So ZimCOD is one of the offshoots of the Jubilee 2000 movements. And our work chronicles from that period in the year 2000 up until now, fighting for debt justice in Zimbabwe, in the region, and across the world. We have collaborated with different debt and development, economic justice organizations within the region, in the continent, and also worked with organizations like Eurodad, for a very long time, collaborated with Debt Justice UK. We've done some publications together. So it's been quite a journey, and we have had some important milestones that we have achieved over the years around debt justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, John. Very comprehensive. Lots of track record there, working with debt organisations in particular. Looking forward to hearing more over the next few minutes. So we're going to ask 3 opening questions, really. And unlike what we usually do, I'm just going to address those to John straight away in one block. And he'll speak to us for around 15 minutes altogether, so roughly 5 minutes for each question. And then we'll open to the floor in the normal way for questions. So, John, the questions I think as you're prepared for are, firstly, what is the level of debt, public debt in Zimbabwe, and how has this situation arisen? Why has it arisen? Secondly, what are the implications of that debt burden for everyday people, everyday citizens in Zimbabwe? And then thirdly, how can the government of Zimbabwe resolve this situation? What can they do? And in particular, are there any external changes to the way that sovereign debt is regulated that you feel might help? So 3 interrelated questions. I'll hand it over to you, and then we're really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. So over to you.
Thank you so much. The levels of public debt in Zimbabwe have risen astronomically over the recent past. But allow me to also say that Zimbabwe's public debt is both historical and also has attributes to current economic management by the administration. I'll start, with the historical part of the debt that the Zimbabwe at independence in 1980 inherited, a legacy debt from the Rhodesian government. And then moving on to the 90s, the Zimbabwean government borrowed massively to finance infrastructural development and other projects. And also during the period of the ESAPs, our public debt also rose significantly during that period. And right up to the period of the year 2000, after the land reform program, from that period onwards, the country defaulted debt repayments, external debt repayments from early 2000, by so doing accumulating arrears and isolation from the international financial institutions and access to concessionary loans. And this is, contributed to the current debt situation. And in order to continue to finance for its development, being isolated from the international financial institutions, unable to access concessional loans, the government was opting for, more expensive loans, the Look East policy, and they're getting expensive loans from China, from Russia, and other countries in the East. So this also contributed to the growing levels of public debt. But we can also not rule out the issue of economic mismanagement on the domestic front, poor fiscal policies, corruption, weak institutions that have also contributed to inefficient use of the borrowed funds. So those borrowed funds cannot properly be accounted for. There's nothing significant to account for what has actually been borrowed. There's been poor management of state-owned enterprises, on an annual basis, making losses and getting government bailouts for these entities. So this has compounded fiscal pressures, created budget deficits year to year. The administration since the early 2000s, when Zimbabwe was placed under sanctions by the US government, by the EU, have been blaming the issue of sanctions on it for the poor economic performance. But like I said, we've always looked at this with our own role in terms of poor economic mismanagement as well, sanctions being in place, but what has been our own contribution in terms of wastage, in terms of fiscal leakages. There are also, activities by the central bank, which contributed to the current high debt, and the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe was engaged in off-budget expenditures, quasi-fiscal activities, issued guarantees contributing to hidden and unrecorded debt. And recently, then the Treasury has assumed some of those debts, about 1.8 billion, I think just a year or so ago, was assumed by the Treasury, RBZ debt. So the issue of debt assumption has also been a very significant issue in terms of contributing to the country's debt stock. The government has assumed debts owed by parastatals. One example is the Zisco Steel, one of the private companies here, state-owned. Currency instability and inflation, limited economic growth. We've been highly consuming economy rather than a productive, a manufacturing and exporting economy. And therefore, there hasn't been much export earnings to support the economy. The current debt composition, the current debt stock, it's hovering around 23 billion United States dollars against an economy slightly below $18 billion. And this is contributed to both external debt and domestic debt, but the large chunk of that debt is actually external debt, over $13 billion. And the major creditors include the World Bank, include the African Development Bank, some Paris Club members, and China as well, and then as well the Afrexim Bank. They are the main creditors for Zimbabwe. And domestic debt also plays a significant role. Like I highlighted, the central bank and the government itself, the Treasury indeed has issued treasury bills and so forth. And of late, under the arrears clearance and debt resolution strategy, another major contributor, the compensation of former farm workers, farm owners. In 2000, Zimbabwe undertook the land reform program. Land was appropriated without compensation. So as part of the debt resolution, the government is compensating former farm owners, and this is created a significant element in the total public debt of about 3.5 billion United States dollars added to the country's debt stock.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
That's a really comprehensive, I think, opener in terms of the first part of the question. How did this arise? I think we're often looking for very simple solutions, but you've painted a picture of a complexity there, which is, I think, as we would expect, with both external factors such as sanctions, external debt, together with a whole lot of internal factors as well. And I think that's really important for us to hear, that sometimes when we're campaigning on an issue, it isn't simple. So thank you for that. If possible, can I move you on to the sort of the second part of this question? Because obviously all of that huge amount of debt then needs to be has consequences. So what does that mean for people going about their business in Zimbabwe?
Implications for ordinary citizens is poor public services. There is no financing for infrastructure development, for improving health services, access to education, access to health, because the huge public debt literally crowds out and creates fiscal pressures for the government to be able to fund the social sector. So this really means that there is a limited funding for our hospitals, for medicines, for schools. It also means a high tax burden on individual citizens as the government tries to raise resources domestically and to widen its tax base. And mostly because the country has become highly informalized. So it's the very few people within the formal sector that are formally employed that are then highly taxed to get the economy running. It also means limited job creation, limited investments, because the poor credit rating, high risk investment destination for the country simply means that we are not creating new jobs for young people. It means we have to continue to deal with poor roads, poor water and sanitation. We're dealing with issues, medieval diseases, cholera outbreaks every year, typhoid, because there is limited funding for those social sectors. And people living in the rural areas, they're actually the hardest hit, and you can see widening inequalities. As all this happens, you'll be surprised that the gap between the rich in Harare, you'll find the latest models of vehicles, the latest, and very expensive houses being built in the flourishing parts of Harare, because there is a few politically connected, part of the population that are able to evade from these effects of rising public debt. While on the other hand, you've got increasing poverty, increasing inequality, and other associated effects in terms of the lived reality by millions of Zimbabwean citizens who are feeling the impact through poor services, like I said, with the economic instability and fewer economic opportunities.
Sorry, I was just on mute myself. That was a long list of issues, some of which I think we might have expected, and others which perhaps we don't think about so much as the consequences of not having adequate funding and too many ways to stretch a limited budget, where such a large amount of the budget is going out onto debt repayments. So that, again, really very helpful answer. Thank you so much for that. And so thirdly, can I ask you just to maybe think about what, maybe this is to open up kind of your advocacy. What are you proposing in your organization for things that the government of Zimbabwe can do, and both in terms of things that are directly within its control, but are there any other things beyond the control of the government of Zimbabwe that would help with that very difficult economic situation?
So thank you so much for that. In our advocacy, we have a global framing. The global framing of our advocacy starts with re-engineering the global financial infrastructure. Curb neoliberal tendencies. Zimbabwe has been at the mercy, whether it's from the east or from the west, countries that are trying to they're not offering sustainable solutions to relieve the country from debt overhang, from its debt crisis. They've got economic agendas, both east and west. It's actually there's competition for investing and dishing out loans to the country. So we are advocating for responsible lending, definitely, and working towards debt sustainability clauses, and improving transparency and creditor coordination. I think at the global level, these are some of our key asks as well around resolution of the current debt stock. The main ask is that just debt cancellation. The country is already poor and suffering. There is really no money. Paying out 23 billion from Zimbabwe's economy really means that more people are going to suffer. More people are going to be poorer already. Our health system is ailing, it's suffering. Out of every 100,000 live child deaths, you are sure that 690 of them are going to die. Out of every 1,000 children under the age of 5, you know that at least 27 of them are going to die before they reach the age of 5 years. So this is astronomical. Hospitals, they don't have medicines. We still have got women giving birth in their own houses with no proper medical support. Children still walking kilometers, 10 kilometers, 12 kilometers to school. And so this is poor access to education. We still have in Zimbabwe children learning under poor shelters. So we believe that debt cancellation it can provide a lasting solution where possible. But coupled with that, the government of Zimbabwe, within its own means, should be able to first and foremost curb waste and curb and rationalize public spending. Review and reform loss-making state-owned enterprises. Also, work towards enforcing anti-corruption laws, audit public contracts, prosecute illicit financial flows, because there's lots of financial leakages, smuggling of minerals outside the country, and weakened institutions. So there's a lot that can be done locally to mobilize resources that are already there. We have got our minerals. These must be channeled towards strengthening our social sectors, our economic sector in Zimbabwe. And of course, pursuing the comprehensive arrears clearance and debt resolution strategy with sincerity and follow through all the reforms, economic reforms, governance reforms that have been highlighted and agreed upon by creditors. I think this is very important. The reforms will benefit Zimbabwe more than anyone else. So those are some of our key asks in terms of resolving the current debt situation in Zimbabwe.
Thank you. That's so clear. And I mean, I'm very struck by how there are things that we need to do in terms of the international system, but also things that the government of Zimbabwe has to do itself as well to curb both those sides of the problem. I see we're at past, but we did start a bit late. John, would it be okay for you to stay with us for another, say, 10 minutes or so, just for a few questions?
Sure, sure. No worries. I'm here.
Brilliant. Well, I see a couple of questions already in the chat box, which I will read out because not everyone, I'm not sure that everyone will be able to read the chat box. So, but does anyone want to open up with the question? Just open your mic and ask your question. And if you could introduce yourself to John before you ask your question.
Hi there, I'm Gillian Price. I live near London. My question is, I see from your website that USAID is one of your funding partners. Are you affected by the withdrawal of USAID?
Yes, Joe, thank you so much. Zimcode was significantly affected by the withdrawal of USAID. We were holding a grant, supported by USAID, a 5-year grant, and yeah, it constituted a significant component of our annual budgets, and yeah, it has curtailed a lot of our programs.
We're hearing that in so many places, aren't we? Let's go on to our next question. I should say that if you want to put your question in the chat, as always, please just put your question in the chat or just ask it as Jill did. And you can also, as always, text me if that's easier for you. So it's 07906 662 571. 07906 662 571. But let's go to the next question that's in the chat, which I have to say I don't quite. Oh, yep, here we go from Peter. Is there a simple measure comparing debt interest with GNI, gross national income? So I guess that's to measure the relative indebtedness of countries. Pete, is that what you're getting at?
No, I want to know what the actual direct comparison is between the real debt repayments and the real income of Zimbabwe.
Right. I don't know, John, is that one you can answer? Is there a simple answer to that one?
Yeah, sure. I can attempt at that one. So the first difficult thing is that, like I highlighted, Zimbabwe has defaulted its debt repayment since 2000 until only, I think, 3-4 years ago, when we started to make token payments. And the token payments really are so small and insignificant that the debt keeps on growing in terms of due to arrears, penalties, and interest. So the repayment part becomes very difficult. But the interest, I can also say that the arrears constitute a bigger portion, more than 60% of our external debt. So that's quite significant. So one of the key asks currently is to curb the growing arrears on our public debt. This is why it's important to keep on engaging our creditors to at least put a cap or to that. Then in terms of our gross national income, I can say that the debt to GDP ratio is currently around 60%. But in real terms, that does not really speak to the lived realities of people on the streets. They are merely figures. Why? Particularly because of the wide inequalities. The GDP figures can be influenced by by some people that are living an abstract life, while the majority of the population is experiencing poverty.
Oh, thank you.
That's really important for us to focus on that, the real experience of people, as opposed to the what the numbers could tell us, and obviously those things are varying all the time, as I think you've set out. Kathy, I see you've got your hand up. You've been waiting patiently. Would you like to go next?
Thank you, John, for giving us a real sense of the sorts of challenges you have. I really have I think Zimbabwe is a wonderful country, not necessarily a wonderfully run, the politicians maybe not so, but the country itself is amazing. And one of the sort of good news things that I have memories of hearing about is the way that the country came together to try and deal with the HIV crisis, the pandemic of HIV, and the fact that there was a sort of tax on all the population, which, although it was small, it was a sense that the country wanted to make a contribution. And because of that commitment by the people of Zimbabwe, it was much easier to get the rest of the world to support universal access to medication, to treatment. And I really was at that time very encouraged by the idea that if a country can show itself to want to change things round. I mean, Zimbabwe still has an HIV challenge, but compared to what it had, things have improved in a certain sense. So is there any way that that sort of support from the people for dealing with some of these challenges could be organized? I know it's a bit vague for me to ask such a question, but thank you anyway.
Can I take that, Naveed? Thank you.
Yes, please. Yes, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for the compliment on the resilience and domestic efforts by citizens of Zimbabwe to stand up to some of the challenges. Yes. The AIDS levy that you're making reference to has made a significant difference in our response to the fight against HIV/AIDS. Yes, so similar efforts have been attempted on other forms of taxation, like there's the health tax. There are other, now they've introduced sugar tax. They've introduced sugar tax on all beverages, just to try and raise some resources towards improving health financing in the country. And this is mainly because they are responding to shrinking donor funding, which has been a key contribution to the health finance in Zimbabwe. And most of these donors, they are either pulling out or they've significantly reduced their budgetary contributions to Zimbabwe. So that's as far as I can say about that. But other problems, you have, if you take into account the fact that, like I said, that the country is highly informalized. So you've got a very big portion of the population which is not taxed. Their transactions, their income is not going through the formal system. They are living hand to mouth. They are vendors, and they are not bankable. So they are not contributing to the national fiscus. That's one big problem. So a small part of the population, about 30% or so, which is in formal employment, is then becomes overtaxed, and that's a huge concern presently. Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned already, I think, that informal part of the economy, which is difficult to help that contribute to the government finances. We're needing to come to the end of our time with you, John, but I can see that Richard has got his hand up, and then there's one other question in the chat that I would love to ask as well. So if you could answer your question, Richard.
Oh, thanks very much, John. Very interesting. I'm not sure if you covered this. Is there any chance these banks will write these loans off? The trouble is, if they do, they're never going to lend any more money, are they? Because it just seems to be a situation where it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and difficult even to pay the interest, let alone the capital.
Can you take
Yeah,
that one, John?
Sure. Thank you. So we're looking at precedences, countries that probably have received such treatment and pushing for that in Zimbabwe. We are also trying to put forward, different leverages, issues like climate change, issues like because Zimbabwe has been victim to climate change, experiences, the cyclones, the COVID-19, and other natural disasters, and we are actually advocating to say these natural experiences, they have further made our capacity to repay even less and less despite the failing economy. And it is only prudent that the multilateral, the bilateral creditors should be able to review and revisit our debt. One of the key issues around that conversation is also around the legitimacy of some of the debt composition. Some of the loans were never benefited the citizens of Zimbabwe, but they actually used it to suppress the rights of the citizens of Zimbabwe. So constituting to odious debt. And in that perspective, we are actually advocating to say we need a debt audit, and could it be even which could then even lead to debt cancellation. It's been our core, it remains our core from that particular perspective. And it's only way that can free up the fiscal space and give Zimbabweans a fresh start.
Thank you, John. That's a really great place for us to have taken the conversation, because I know when we're going to have to move on now, but we are going to need to look at that, how you do that thing in a way that's fair and globally consistent. So we will be coming on to that in our future advocacy. So I've got that one last question, which I don't know, John, if it's even fair to ask you, but do you have an idea of how much of the country's debt is owed to UK banks or institutions? Obviously, that's relevant to our advocacy here, because we can use that to try and put moral pressure on our politicians to kind of help ease the situation.
Thank you so much. I do not have this specific figure right now.
That's okay.
But I know that
probably unfair to expect you to know it.
Yes,
But I would ask
but I'm aware that there are about 3 significant loans to the Zimbabwean government, and one such was actually funding police vehicles, Zimbabwean police vehicles. At some point, it's linked to the Land Rovers. I know that is the company, and this has been spotlighted as one of the cases of an odious debt. The vehicles did not last, 3-5 years. The vehicles were used by the police, to oppress human rights in Zimbabwe. That was the peak of human rights abuse in Zimbabwe by the Mugabe regime. So there's been argument among citizens to say, should we really pay for such? And it's a call to ask those the creditors to revisit. But the UK banks, some are actually funded investments, they funded infrastructure developments and so forth. So it can be something that is helpful for you to speak around those creditors as well, to review the terms, particularly curbing the arrears.
That is really helpful, that link to the UK. So that's something that we can follow up. Thank you. I have promised John that we'll let him get away before, soon after past as we can. But I see that Sunit has got his hand up, and I have to, I think, give the last word to Sunit, who's been, as some of you know, we're going to be carrying on with this conversation a little bit longer. But Sunit is one of our experts on this this issue of global kind of financial. The global financial system, and particularly as it relates to things like nutrition. Sunit, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Naveed. I just wanted to thank John for an incredible presentation and obviously for taking the time to answer all of those questions. I've had the pleasure of working with John for many years now, and I just wanted to pick up on the point that he made at the end there about the those UK loans. So I was just looking back at an earlier publication of mine. This was pre-results UK, and I actually had a case study on Zimbabwean debt, and I see that it was 1998 that the UK government backed £15 million of loans for the Zimbabwean police to buy British-made Land Rovers. And at the time, political repression was increasing in the country, and the vehicles were used in attacks on protesters. So I think that's a really powerful example of odious debt. And another one, just very quickly, is that Zimbabwe actually inherited a $700 million debt from the racist Rhodesian regime of Ian Smith. And that forced the government, the post-independence government, to take out new loans to pay those Rhodesian debts. So another example of odious debts as well. Thanks.
I think that's really important to pick up that idea of the odiousness of debts, which I think goes quite some way to answer Richard's question of, isn't it commercially kind of necessary? So that's something that's I'm really glad has come out of the conversation. We are going to have to stop this part of the call now. We've got a few minutes to go through the rest of our normal agenda, but John, we need, obviously it's getting on for 10 o'clock, I think, your time, isn't it? So I do need to let you get away. And I just wanted to say a massive thank you, as Summit has, really just repeat what he said, to thank you for sharing your experiences with us, and good luck with your important work that you're doing in Zimbabwe for debt justice and for development. We, from our distance away geographically, but with you very closely in spirit, we really thank you. And so please do feel free to leave us now and enjoy what's left of your evening. For the rest of us,
thank you so much, Naveed. Thank you, everyone. Sunit and colleagues, I hope we'll connect with you sometime soon. Thank you so much.
Thank
Absolutely,
you again,
John. Cheers. Thank you.
So I have put a little bit of time. We've got a few things that we normally go through, such as just doing a roundup of the campaigning that you're doing, a few UK related kind of issues. But I did want to quickly hand over to Summit to talk a little bit more, so it's a bit more of the background to our current monthly action. We have just heard about one country, which is a really great case study there, and some particular places to dig into in terms of the odious debt. But we in the UK, we have to think about what is our part that we can play in changing this global system that enables this to continue. So we have in June, or the 30th of June to the 3rd of July, in fact, to be specific, what I'm thinking of as a once in a decade chance to influence the UK government, which I hope isn't too much of a overstating it, but it's a thing called the Financing for Development Conference, which will take place in Seville in Spain. And these Financing for Development conferences literally do happen once every 10 years. So the last one was back in 2015 in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. And the next one, as I say, is just coming up very soon. So that's really explains the timing for our current monthly action. And I'm also just putting the link to the action in the chat. You will have all have been emailed that just a few days ago. But obviously, we have seen over recent decades a decline, increase. There's been progress, hasn't there? We know about declines in absolute poverty, a decline in some disease burdens, for example. By some indicators, poverty has been getting less bad. But then much more recently, we are seeing some of those gains going into reverse by some indicators. And whilst we know that official development assistance, ODA, from wealthy countries can be really important, and John did advert to it, it's not by any means the way that we're going to solve those problems of the country's fiscal space that John was referring to. And so it's right that we should expect that countries aren't going to want to be dependent on aid forever. But in order to do so, they need to be able to arrange their own financing. And they're just simply not helped by some of those barriers that John talked about. So I'm going to hand over to Sunit. If I can ask you, Sunit, to just maybe spend about 5 minutes, if you can, because we are really pushed for time a bit, to just give us your take on, from the UK's perspective, what we would like to see the UK's contribution to solving this problem is, particularly in the run-up to that conference, but it's obviously going to take a lot longer than that.
Yes, thanks, Naveed. Well, I mean, I can talk about debt specifically. Obviously, John was talking about debt, particularly in the case of Zimbabwe. In our report published last year, Bad Loans, Poor Nutrition, that I actually presented at a monthly grassroots call, we have a case study on Zambia that we worked with our action partner Citan Plus on in that report. And yeah, obviously debt remains a big focus of our work, not just in relation to nutrition, but it cuts across all of our themes, of course. And yeah, something that we're focusing on very much in the in the run up to and at the financing for development conference in Seville that Naveed just mentioned. But of course, we are also keeping an eye on wider financing for development issues, so beyond ODA. Debt is one of those. Another one is illicit financial flows, and I'll actually be working on a project on illicit financial flows, again, anchoring it in nutrition, but again, it cuts across. It's a topic that cuts across all of our thematic areas. I'll be working on that in the second half of this year, and I look forward to presenting that to you at some point towards the end of this year or early next year. But just in terms of returning to the topic of debt, I think that, and as we've only got a very short time, I think that it's worth actually just restating the recommendations from our reports. And one of those recommendations is around reforming UK laws so that private sector loans to global south countries are lawful and transparent. And that very much dovetails and ties in neatly with John's call for the support for debt audits in global south countries like Zimbabwe. And so, that is an area that I think marries up sort of really, really well. We need mandatory transparency and accountability for loans that are provided using UK law. And as we say in our report last year, around 90% of all private sector loans to global south countries are taken out under English law. So the UK government actually has a huge role to play, in this. But it also goes beyond, lawfulness and transparency. It also is around ensuring that our domestic legislation, specifically the Debt Relief Developing Countries Act of 2010, is updated, is amended, so that existing protections that it contains for global south governments are actually extended in their application to relate to all internationally agreed debt restructuring. At the moment, those protections only relate to countries that go through the enhanced HIPC process, highly indebted poor countries initiative process, which is managed by the IMF. So there's a lot we can do domestically in terms of legislation, and there's a lot we can do in terms of supporting global south countries to actually really understand, how much debt they truly owe and to whom. They're two areas. And then I think at the global level, and obviously this Financing for Development conference is a global level conference, I think there's a lot that we can say around challenging the G20's common framework, which, again, we argue in our report, has singularly failed. And there's a need for a UN sovereign debt restructuring mechanism and a UN automatic debt cancellation mechanism for global south countries affected by economic shocks or emergencies. So the sovereign debt restructuring mechanism would be for those countries that find themselves in a more general sort of sense of debt distress, which is a technical sovereign debt term, But those global south countries that are affected by economic shocks or emergencies, whether they're armed conflicts or natural disasters, flooding, earthquakes, etc., and of course would include climate related emergencies, could apply to a UN mechanism that very quickly cancels debt, so they can start redirecting funding to dealing with those shocks and emergencies. The final one, Naveed, sorry, the final one was advocating that the International Monetary Fund reforms its very flawed debt sustainability framework. And again, we explain in the report why it's so flawed, and ends all economic policy conditionality, which is this imposition of undemocratic and frequently damaging sort of one-size-fits-all conditionality on recipient governments. It just frankly, like I said, it's illegitimate and it doesn't work. So we're calling, for big changes in terms of how the IMF operates in relation to debt as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Sonnet. And sorry to push this on, but there's so many. Each of these issues we can unpick, and I can see some more questions coming in, but we really do have to wrap up shortly. We've got a few other things we need to cover. So in the action materials that we've shared in the chat and that we've shared with you by email, we've tried our best to summarize all of the different issues, not just around debt, but also around some of the conditionalities that Sonnet was mentioning, around the illicit financial flows and corruption, that all of the things that we want governments at the Financing Development Conference to deal with. So we have to leave it there, but if you've got any specific questions, can I suggest that you file them my way, maybe by email, and we will pass them on to Sonnet or somebody else in the office, and we will get back to you. But there's a lot to unpack in. I'm sure, I know, as Sonnet said, we are going to be continuing to work on this, and we'll be coming back to this later in the year. So I do want us to move on now to hear a bit about your advocacy around the UK, as we always do. A big thank you to everyone who's shared a recent campaign letter or a response over the last month or so that you've had. We always really value seeing those. We learn a lot from them, and there's it's just really, really great to see. I wanted to thank you for what is now more than 30 actions that you've collectively shared with me on the reductions to the UK's ODA budget. It's a huge response, and I'm sure we're not yet done on this topic. For those of you who have signed up to attend our joint lobby day in Westminster on those ODA cuts, that's Tuesday the 20th of May, thank you very much. If you're planning to attend but not yet signed up, please could you do so using the link that I'm again just about to share in the chat. That way we've got your names and details, and I will be able to get back to you with a full briefing for the day, which is imminent. It's not quite there yet, but we'll be sending it to you. But I only know who to send it to if you actually sign up using that link. And best of luck with all of you who are trying to get your MP to meet you on the day. The briefing will include some information on what's been called in-donor refugee costs, which is that part of, I think, about a third of the UK's ODA budget, which has been spent housing or otherwise looking after refugees, which is a good thing, but it shouldn't be coming at the expense of the money that is going to countries to help, alleviate poverty, solve all sorts of health issues, etc., as you all know so well. So if you have the opportunity to raise that with your MP, it would be great if you can do that where you can. Our Parliamentary Advocacy Officer, Sugna Lakhani, will be coming to the Westminster event. She's here on the call. Sugna, do you want to just say hello and introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I think I will have met some of you before. I am Results' Parliamentary Advocacy Officer, and I'm really excited to be going to the lobby day with all of you.
Thanks, Sugna. So if you're there on the day, do go over and say hello to Sugna. She's there to support you, answer any questions you may have, help you to connect up with your MP if you haven't already been able to do so. You really need to try and be able to do so before the day, but fingers crossed. So thank you for supporting us on that, Sugna. And then we've also started to see some letters come in on the education action that we did last month. Again, that report there about the state of education funding also really highlights some of these systemic problems such as debt that prevent countries from from funding education as well as things like health. Thank you to Ricky and to Kathy for sharing your letters recently. I don't know if anyone else has got any letters or actions that they've recently taken that they'd like to share now. Glynis, are you trying to unmute or? No. Okay. I'm probably going to go over just a couple of minutes, so I'm going to keep going. We've got another plug for our summer gathering event, which is what some of you will know formerly we used to call our national conference, but the last few years it's been a one-day event. And so this is the again, I've just put the link to that in the chat box for those of you who've not yet seen it. It's the Sunday, the 22nd of June. The agenda will very shortly be shared with you. We're still just firming that up now, including speakers. And then we have our usual advocacy day on the Monday, the 23rd. And again, we've got some MPs lined up, fingers crossed, and we're working on civil servant teams for you to meet as well. So please do sign up to that. I know it's really not very far away now. It's just about 6 or 7 weeks away. Thank you also to those of you who filled in our survey telling us what days you preferred this call to be on. So I really wanted to just quickly say a little bit about that. What came out of that was that about 60% of you voted to keep these calls on a Tuesday, with 50% of you going for a second option of Wednesday. That's sort of within the 60%, or yeah, separate questions. You're like, what was your alternative day? And then 20% going for Thursdays. So I think what that means is we'll carry on for going for the Tuesdays, unless for any reason we need to move them for 1 month. The majority of you said stick to the first week of each month at 8 p.m. So we'll do that. Half of you said keep the calls at the same time, but the other half were more flexible. So again, I think that gives us the room to move them when we need to enable certain people to be there, or to get a speaker that we otherwise wouldn't be able to get, or whatever. And again, very useful information. 60% of you said you would watch the call recording if you aren't able to attend. And there were only other comments, including you valued having unstructured discussion time as part of these calls, and that we need to make sure that if we are going to make any changes, we communicate them well in advance. And that's a very good call. So thank you to all of you who helped us with that information. I want to just now introduce one more staff member who some of you have met and some of you who have not, which is Stephanie Brooks, Head of Operations, who's been sitting patiently on the call there. And she wanted to just say a little bit of an update on Results' fundraising efforts and the importance of our individual donors. So can I hand over to you, Stephanie?
Yes. Thank you all for waiting to listen to me, and I'm going to try and keep this quite short. And also apologies, because some of you may be getting what I'm going to say as a message for about the second or third time. But some of you may know that for the last 25 years, we've had a small number of very committed donors who have given us individual donations every month via standing order for the last 25 years. Very unexpectedly in March, Santander closed the account that all of those standing orders were going into, which meant that we are currently losing out on all of those donations. So what I just wanted to do is I'm trying to get in touch with as many people as possible who have been donating to us and supporting our work over the last, over a significant period, to just try and let them know the reason why, if you've been regularly giving us a donation, it might be returned to you mysteriously. And also to let you know that we've set up a new platform on our website for donations if people would like to donate to us again.
And I've just put that link in the chat, Stephanie.
Oh, okay, lovely, thank you. And then the reason why we want to do this, obviously, is that although we don't get a lot of money compared to other organisations through our individual donations, the money that we get it's like pure gold, because it funds all the things that donors don't want to fund. None of them are very glamorous and exciting, but they're all things like making sure that we've got stationery, making sure that we can cover our insurance bills, paying for staff members who do really unglamorous things like Riesta, who does all our payments and finance, and just the stuff that we can't get covered from elsewhere. And then the other thing I wanted to just kind of alert you to is that we're also looking at a number of other ways that we can increase our fundraising activities. And some of these you might be hearing about in the next couple of months. Some of them might involve Results UK staff doing very silly things, and some of them might give you an opportunity to kind of get to know a little bit more about who we are and what we do in a fun way. So we're working on those, and they may well be popping up in the next kind of like news flash over the next few months as well. I think that's all for now.
Thank you, Stephanie, and you know, thank you to everybody who has supported you know, our fundraising, funding, as well as the advocacy that you all do. I can't leave that topic without wishing the best of luck to the pool group on Saturday the 17th, who are running their plant sale. I think it's we've got Janet and Glynis and Peter here. So best of luck to all of you and all of the other pool group members. Hope it goes really well. Anything you want to say about how the preparation's going, or? Oh, we can't hear you. No, we will nonetheless. I'm sure it is going really well. We wish you very best of luck, and maybe we can hear about it.
Sorry, Naveed, we've just...
Oh, we can hear you now.
Yeah, we've just worked out how to unmute ourselves. Yeah, no, I think Deirdre's our main grower, and Janet will be our main cake maker.
Oh, right.
And I will be the main twister of arms.
All extremely important roles. Thank you so much for your efforts in advance, and good luck with it. And I hope you have good weather.
Thank you, Naveed. Thanks.
So I definitely need to call a close to this. Sorry for trying to fit probably too much into one call, and sorry for overrunning slightly. Very best of luck with all of your advocacy if you can deal with this request to we're asking you to write to the Chancellor and to the Foreign Secretary about this opportunity for financing for development. And so, as I said, we'd love to hear how you get on. So we need to finish the call. And as always, we'll keep it open, keep the line open for a few minutes after the end of the formal end of the call just now, for up to an extra half an hour, probably more like 20 minutes now. But if you would like to, please do stay and chat informally. But if you are not able to stay for that, or you know, you need to get away, it's late in the evening, do enjoy the rest of your evenings. And thank you again for all that you're doing.